Her situation, we weren't able to stop. But now that people are aware and mobilised and ready to stand in the way to let them stay, there's an example of possibly mobilising and rapid responding to attend out at BITA. It might mean being aware of when planes are departing with people. And some of you might have heard of the young woman who stood up and refused to buckle her seatbelt on a Qantas plane that was going from Melbourne to Darwin. There was a young Tamil asylum seeker whose claim for refugee status had failed, but who was going to be sent back to likely imprisonment and torture in his country. She stood up and she refused to sit down and buckle her seatbelt until he was taken off the plane, and so he could not be deported. That's our very own Rosa Parks. Yeah, absolutely, applaud. We need more people like that speaking out, and today we're here to say, what can we do? What can we do in our city in circumstances when we know people are being put in harm's way? So when that story happened, sadly, a couple of years ago, and her case is still unfolding, she did manage to encourage a few others on that flight to stand with her. But when Australian Border Force entered the plane to escort her off the plane, people cheered. What we want is people cheering when it is asylum seekers, people seeking asylum, people seeking safety, who are allowed to stay. That's what we want cheers for. We don't want cheers because our border force has been strong and we have removed the vulnerable people to danger. This is not a Star Wars film, this is real life. And what can we do to be real humans in this situation? So we're talking about sanctuary in churches all around the country, in cathedrals like this where we're gathered today. We're talking about brave people who say, no, I'm not going to let you take this plane to take this person to harm. Pilots who have refused to fly planes because they know that there are people on board who are about to be deported to harm's way. As I mentioned already, the detention centres could be a place where we call people to rapid response, and we've already seen the example at Lady Salento at the hospital. There are other hospitals around Brisbane where asylum seekers are also being who are spending time for medical treatment, and it might mean mobilising in other places at other points. So today is also about signing on to be part of a list of communication, staying in touch and being aware of what is going on, and communicating with one another. That might mean having a bag packed with some water and a change of clothes and scooting off in the middle of the night if you get a message. But we're here today because people are willing to do that. People slept for a week on the concrete outside a hospital because they are willing to do this. Who here is willing to keep doing this today? Look around. This is what we want our government to know. This is what we want Border Force to know. We are a stronger force. We are a force of compassion and love who will say we pledge to get in the way to let them stay.
Thank you. One of the interesting things about when you get the breakdown in cooperation with an unjust system is remarkable things happen. So at the vigil, the police, there was a period where we moved onto the road to prevent cars coming out because we'd heard reports that there would be the removal of the family, baby Ash and her family. And what was incredible is that not only did drivers cooperate with us as we did inspections of vehicles as they left, but even the police cooperated with us, which is incredible. And it's a demonstration that at the state level at least there were people saying, well, this isn't our bag, deporting kids, we're not going to be part of that. That said, it's important that we understand what are our legal rights and our scenarios in relation to both the police, the federal police and the border force. And that's actually a relatively untested area of law. But there are some people who have had a long history of experience dealing with protests and police rights and responsibilities in terms of arrests, one of which is the barrister Sean Reedy, who's a prominent Labor lawyer and barrister. And I'd invite Sean Reedy up to give us a brief presentation of what are your basic rights and responsibilities when dealing with arrestable actions. Sean.
On the last minute ring-in, they dusted the cobwebs off me and brought me out. There was someone far more fashionable who was slotted to speak. I'll have to apologise because I've had very limited time to prepare on this, but that gives you the benefit of making it short and sweet, which is what I'll do. I've been asked to address a series of questions, but there's a couple of things that occurred to me in reading this stuff that need to be addressed. I'll go through them not in any particular order, other than these are the things that were presented to me. The first is right to protest and lawful assembly. Well, there is that right. People can protest, people can gather, and it can't be interfered with. The only regulation is if people want to march, then in the modern day and age you ought to get a permit, and that's relatively easy. You apply to the police for that. What really is the issue for people is what they do when they gather to protest, and that's where the trouble may come. I was at the hospital, and it was an extremely well organised event, and the police were very, very good in my observation anyway. And that really is the key to it, having been both experienced as a lawyer attending protests and having been arrested myself at a protest, quite accidentally. I can tell you from that experience that having some form of relationship with the police is important. One of the notes further down the list talks about police liaison. If you are organising a protest, I think that's one of the things you need to do from an organisational perspective. Back in the 70s and 80s, police wouldn't even consider dealing with a police liaison person. Now they welcome it, and that is, I think, a really important step to take. A second ago, there was mention of legal observers. It's noticeable to me in protests over recent years the absence of legal observers. Because of the excesses in the 70s and 80s, there was a very well organised legal observer system. In fact, for a period of time, I was part of organising it. I would suggest very strongly that whoever is organising a protest also arranges to have legal observers, and it's quite easy, I think, to get those people. For example, it used to be organised through Labor lawyers primarily. It used to be organised also through the Queensland Council for Civil Liberties, and now you have the additional benefit of the Australian Lawyers for Human Rights. I think you'll get a big mob of lawyers if you approach those organisations. That moves me on to the next point, and that is not in my notes, but an observation I made. There are some quite complex issues here, because there are three forms of law enforcement with which people can be confronted. One is the Queensland Police, another is the Australian Federal Police, and the other is the Australian Border Force, that paramilitary mob that so gracefully adorns our airports when you go in and out. The important thing for people being involved in action is to understand the respective powers of each of those bodies. Now, I haven't got time to go through that, and I just suggested before coming here that what really needs to happen is a little information sheet needs to be done for people, explaining those powers in very simple terms and what they can and cannot do. And so I think that's a step for action. Moving back to the script, probably the best way to approach it is this. What happens if you're approached by police at an action? What can you do and what can they do? Well, one of the things they may do is ask you for your name and address. Now, normally they're not entitled to do that unless they have some sort of reason for doing so. In practice, I would say you would do this. Say, well, look, no trouble, this is my name, this is my address, but can I ask you to tell me why you are asking me this? Because I don't think you have a good reason to do it. Do it in a much more polite voice than I'm asking, because I'd be particularly offended, but try not to be offended. But you're entitled to ask that, and you're also perfectly entitled to ask their name, their rank, and the station to which they are attached. and you should have a little notebook, or I think people like have smaller versions of these things, jot it down in there. But you should take that detail. In the event that things do go pear-shaped, evidence is very important. So one of the questions that's asked of me is, can we film police? Can we record police? The answer is absolutely yes, you can. And I think it is important to do so if there is any suggestion that things look like they're getting out of hand. It's a safety precaution, but bear in mind, anything filmed could also be used as evidence against you. But it is an important, sobering thing for police to know that they're being recorded. I suppose the last thing I want to finish on is this. In terms of the issue of sanctuary, places where people may or may not be, the police do not have an automatic right of entry. The only way they can get in is either with the consent of the person who owns or is in control of the property, or with a warrant and in certain emergent circumstances. I don't have the time to go through the detail of that, but what I hope I've given you is a little potted overview out of which you can take one or two useful points. Thank you.
I'm now inviting Reverend Ken Baker from Love Makes a Way and the Wesleyan City Church to come and give you a presentation around codes of conduct. And I'll let him explain that. Thanks. My role today is to talk to you about this sheet. Yours will be a little smaller, but it will contain the same information. The Cathedral has worked with Love Makes a Way and other groups to script the code of conduct that we're inviting you to read this afternoon. Later on, we will actually read it together. You'll have an opportunity, we will vocalise it together. The Cathedral is requiring that anyone who's involved in sanctuary abide by this code of conduct. The code of conduct is based on that old idea that we might treat others as we would wish to be treated. And you will see some situations that we have codified, and we invite you to read through those. You might find one or 2 points that are personally challenging, and we invite you to do the internal, reflective, meditative and spiritual work required for you to be prepared to abide by that code of conduct. As we do this, as Dave talked about, we step into a long tradition which hopes that by acting in this way, we are inviting the sympathetic, the undecided, and even those who oppose us to join with us. And history has shown that this crazy idea can be remarkably successful, but it is determined largely on the discipline of those involved in the movement. For those who wish to be involved in shielding, as was just one of the roles that was played up here, the Cathedral requires that you come to training specifically for that. Some of you indicated that you have already been to training in the Darnell room earlier on. There is training this coming Wednesday the 16th, from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Flyers are also going around about that training. 6 p.m. sharp. Please, if you have to move something from your calendar, it would be wonderful if you do that if you wish to be involved in shielding at the sanctuary. There is also a sign-in sheet many of you would have seen, and there is a possibility to indicate that you will come to that event or to future training. If you're wanting to do shielding, make sure you get a tick on those so that we can contact you and tell you about those trainings which will be coming up. So we will be, at the end of the action, reading through the code of conduct. So please take the chance just to browse it. We will be doing that at the end of this action. Thank you. Okay, so now we've had enough of the sitting and standing bit, we're going to move to the active bit. So let me explain what's going to happen. But before I do that, Are there any questions? We've got probably 5 minutes where we've got questions, not comments, if that's all right. The lady there. Yeah.
So the question was, has there been
I'll do it through the mic. So yeah. The question was, has there been any attempt to seek interpreters? And if that's in relation to people coming to seek sanctuary, absolutely. Not only will they require interpreters, they'll be needing to get their own legal advice, and that legal advice will need to be effective to them, so it will need to be communicated to them. Yeah, and I guess that's outside somewhat the remit of this training, but certainly that's something that the Cathedral and others are looking at. Any other questions here? Yeah, right. The question was, are there any questions about guidelines around children being present? I'm going to look to Love Makes a Way. No, we don't have any guidelines about that yet. I think if it was to happen here at the Cathedral, your first point of contact for any questions like that would be the very Reverend Peter Cat at the back. Yeah, the plan that has currently been agreed in conjunction for here, in relation to the sanctuary, the plan that has currently been agreed on is that there will be a coordinating group that will be in a good situation briefed before someone comes to seek sanctuary, in an unplanned sanctuary that leads to a sanctuary in this church immediately. They will then call in people, and in the first instance they'll be calling people with training, and there's already 80, and we hope that after next Wednesday there'll be hundreds. But the idea is that to effectively do it, we're going to need a rolling event. And we will put out the call relatively quickly afterwards. And I guess what we'll see is that there's different levels of action that people will take. So one of the concepts we have is of the shield and the vigil. The shield will be people who have done training in accordance with the process of this sanctuary, and they would be people who would be blocking doors or would be standing immediately in front of doors to be arrested. But then ultimately the most effective mechanism to prevent entry into a closed cathedral will be the hundreds of people that we require to be present who may not need to actually be in front of a door. The experience of others who've done a whole lot of non-violent direct action is that numbers that's as much protection. Another quick question. Yep. Other questions down here at the front. There is a flyer about the implications of being arrested. However, we actually, rather than hand it out, we looked at getting it reviewed. There was some debate around some of the content in there, particularly in relation to Border Force. We were actually just having a legal discussion over there. We want to make sure we have accurate situations with a force which is mainly created to manage migration and the arrest of people on immigration detention. Now, most of us here don't have any real cause for them to interact with us directly in terms of migration status, because I'm presuming many of us are Australian citizens and we're not seeking to leave or enter the country. So we're going to update it. No. I'm going to ask Ken to come and explain that one. The question was, in the guidelines it says I will not provoke police with my camera, is one thing.
Look, I would say we followed the guidelines that have just been given by Sean, and the idea would be, and I think a fair bit of this wording is that we are attempting not to provoke, not to treat someone else as an other or someone that we would wish to antagonise, provoke, etc. What our desire is, and this is a long history of tradition, is that even those who come against us with some force, some anger, that we attempt to absorb that anger, and actually we may not be able to reply with a whole lot of loving, joyful gusto, but we may be able to reply with discipline and respect. So that general thought would be applied to cameras or whatever.
But, you know, people are smart, they worked out their own way of how they're going to do that. Up there. Big voice. The second training on Wednesday, is it similar to the first?
Yes, many similar elements, but it will cover some other stuff if we are asking people to get to both if they can.
Did you hear that? So the section on the Wednesday, this Wednesday, is similar, but will extend on from what was happening. I think there's going to be a showing a video, a Force More Powerful. There was planning to be, I don't know, and also developing further the capacity of people. Listen, if that's all right, I might. I've got time for one more question. Up the back, if there's anyone up the back. No. Down the front, then one more question. No more questions. Okay. So, what are we going to do now? So, as I said, around Australia, people are coming and they are making a stance, an active pledge to say we are prepared to risk arrest, to take action to prevent people from being deported into abuse. So now what we'd like to do is lead people in that process. So we're going to move through the front gates of the cathedral, and we're going to walk down the stairs, and we're going to assemble ourselves on the second set of stairs. Okay? And after we've done there, the cathedral leadership, so the Very Reverend Peter Katz and other leadership, will stand at the front door of the cathedral. This is symbolising the fact that they are the physical embodiment of the active sanctuary, the invitation to come into a state of sanctuary. Then we will call forward people, one row at a time, who are willing to say, we will stand in the way of those, now let me get this right, we'll stand in the way for those who might seek shelter within this cathedral to let them stay. So that's not required of everyone. But if you're willing to say you'll put your body in the way, we invite you to come up at a row at a time, turn around, face towards the street, and repeat that pledge. And you'll be led in that pledge by Reverend Ken. After that we've filled up the rows and we've done that, now as people do that, we'll ask them to link arms. Okay? And we get about 16 people across each step. Normally this happens for wedding photos. But this will be equally joyous. And we then, once we've filled those steps and everyone we have who said they're willing to make that pledge, we will then ask everyone who would like to, as much as is possible, stay in a non-arrestable position. Not that we're anticipating any arrest today, there's no actual legal issue today, but practicing this as a training, we're going to ask those people to come forward from the lower steps up to the pathway and stand in the pathway, turned around, face back to the street, and we'd ask them to also pledge that and we'll be led in a pledge, that they pledge to be present. I'm trying to find the words for it. We pledge to be present in solidarity with those who come seeking sanctuary to let them stay. It'll be something like that. After that, we will then sing a song. And it's an old song, but it's a good one. And it's a song that actually comes from the African American spiritual movement, but I always knew it as a union song because I come from a union family. And it goes something like, we shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree planted by the water, we shall not be moved. Something like that. There's now, no clap me, clap us when we do it. So there will be people who will lead us in the singing of that, some with slightly less tremulous voices than me. And there's some separate lines in there that signify the people who are behind us. But we're going to have a practice run as we walk out. Now, after we do that, we're going to hand out the codes of conduct. And the final piece we will do in this action is Reverend Ken will lead us in a call and response, and we're asking everyone who's willing to do the linking arm stuff to actually respond with that pledge. Particularly in relation to any action for this space and this cathedral, we're making it as a common statement of both the love and the care and the concern we have, but also the anger and the ability, the willingness we have to actually stand up and to risk arrest and to put our bodies in the way. And that will be the final piece with which we close this action and this training here today. This will be a public event in front of the cameras. If you do not want to be photographed, I would recommend standing out of shot. You can certainly be part of it, you can sing, but everyone who's kind of in the front view of the stairs, that's what you're going to be doing. You will be photographed, so you're kind of giving your consent by presence. So are people clear with that? We're going to walk out there, we're going to go all the way down the second stairs, people are going to come up. Now, last thing, as we go, we're going to sing. So let's have one practice run. Ready? Can someone come and help me sing this, please? Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Right, up we go and out we go. Keep going. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved.
Do you want me to have one of those at the end? Anything else? Another one?